especially when these issues around burnout are not openly discussed in our professions. It's difficult to know that, oh, hang on a sec, what I'm feeling is related to burnout, or it's related to feeling traumatized, etc. Because it's just kind of generalized discomfort that I can't put a label on. I'll just stay and tolerate it and hope for the best.
Hey there, I'm Goli Kalkaran, and this is Lessons from a Quitter, where we believe that it's never too late to start over. No matter how much time or money you've spent getting to where you are, if ultimately you are not happy, then it's time to get out. If you're feeling stuck and you feel like there's gotta be more, there's gotta be a way to feel fulfilled and excited about what you do, then this is the podcast for you. Each week, I will sit down with an inspiring guest who quit their professional career in order to forge their own path and create a life that they love. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. You're in for a great one. We have Dr. Maria Phalime on the show, and her journey is just so inspiring and interesting to see how she went from a medical doctor to such a successful coach and what that journey looked like. We'll get to that in a second. But I wanted to just let you guys know that I am closing doors to my group program, Stuck to Strategy, tomorrow night on the 18th. So it's the last day and a half that you have to sign up if you're interested. I would love to see you in this group. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about who it's for and what it is for. I think that we all think that we need someone to give us the answer of what we should be doing, right? I constantly hear about how do I figure out what I should do? What's next? And actually, today's episode is a great one because we will talk to Maria about how it took almost 10 years for her to figure out what the thing is that she loves doing that lights her up and what that journey is like. But the reason I did this podcast is to show that there is no one thing, right? There's just the next step and the step after that. And too often we don't take any steps because we are just overwhelmed. And I know if you listen to the podcast, I'm a broken record talking about the clarity comes from action. You start taking action and it starts becoming clear to you what you like, what you don't like, where you want to go, what you want to do. And so often we're just looking for a formula. We want someone to teach us, how do you start a business? How do you figure out what you should do? And we want the steps. And people can sell that to you all day. And they're great steps to take. A lot of times, you need that guidance. What I think so often we don't realize is that none of that stuff matters if you don't actually work on your mindset and really understanding what is stopping you and why you're not taking the action and how you can move past that. Because, as many of us know, if you take a look at the health and fitness world, people can tell you what to do all the time. They can give you a million different diets. They can give you a million different exercise regimens. And none of it works if you can't get over all of the mental and emotional baggage you have around food and working out and feeling inadequate and everything that we have tied into it, right? Which is the same thing when I see people quitting, is all of the mental baggage of what will people say? I don't know what else I would do. I don't have any other skills. I'm not smart enough. What if I fail? What if this doesn't work and I have to crawl back to this job? What if I regret it? All of that stuff is what keeps you stuck. Otherwise, it's just experimentation, right? It's just trying something, seeing if it works. But we don't because we're embarrassed of failing in front of other people or of not doing it right or of not knowing, or we get so overwhelmed. And that is really what Stuck to Strategy is for. I want to spend 12 weeks giving you the community and support and accountability that you need to actually start taking action so that in the first 3 months of the new year, you will accomplish more than you would have if you put it off by yourself for all of 2020. I want you to get in there and really understand what is stopping you, how to get over that, and how to create steps so that you are consistently taking action towards your dreams. And all you need is a couple hours a week, 2, 3, maybe 4 hours a week, an hour here and there. And it will make a world of difference in 2020 for you. So if that's something that you are interested in, I would love to see you in there. I would love to be able to work with you and walk alongside you in this journey of finding work that really lights you up. So you can go to quitterclub.com/group and check out all the information there. And if you have any questions, you can DM me or send me an email. I'm happy to answer. But again, we are closing doors by the evening of the 18th. So you should get on that quick if you're interested. And now to jump to this very special episode with Maria. She is a medical doctor, an award-winning author, a speaker, and a coach based in Cape Town, South Africa. During her time as a junior doctor, she realized that the way medical students were trained in doctors' work is unsustainable and it was detrimental to her health. And we will talk a lot about her decision to leave. And when she left, she hadn't worked through a lot of the guilt she felt for leaving, not knowing what she wanted to do. And we'll talk about how that journey really took her 5 to 10 years of really figuring out to herself, answering the questions of like, why did I leave my medical practice? And she'll talk a lot about how she came to those answers in writing her award-winning memoir, Post-Mortem, The Doctor Who Walked Away. And she is now a dynamic and accomplished business and leadership coach. She helps people with brain-based neuroscience type coaching so that they can change their behavior and actually sustain it. She's also a adjunct senior lecturer at the University of Cape Town's Nelson Mandela School of Public Governance. And what's amazing is that through her own journey of quitting and how she felt about quitting and why she quit, and then writing this book, how she has basically sparked a conversation within the medical practice in South Africa to talk about burnout and how to keep doctors in the profession. I cannot stress enough that like how much you should take the time to watch her TED Talk. She also did a TED Talk for TEDx Johannesburg. And in it, she goes into more depth of when the moment was that she realized she wanted to quit medicine and a lot of what that her journey to medicine even looked like. It's very powerful. I highly recommend it. I will link to it in the show notes. She just has some really amazing insight, and her story really highlights what a lot of us go through when we know we're unhappy, but don't really know what to do from there. So without further ado, let's jump in and talk to Maria. Hi, Maria. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Golly. Great. Thanks for having me on your show.
I am so excited to have you on the show, and I can't wait to talk about your journey and everything that you are doing now. We typically start back kind of at the beginning at the former career, and we talk a lot about that transition. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about what led you to become a doctor, and what did your career as a doctor look like?
Okay, well, as being a doctor for me was my childhood dream. I think like many children, I had, big dreams of making a difference. I was very fortunate that, I did well at school. I was interested in the sciences. And so medicine was a natural choice for me. And really, when by the time, in the final years of high school, that was it. I wasn't even considering other options. So I was very clear that that's what I wanted to do. And then, when I got into medical school, I was absolutely thrilled to have got to that place. And I worked very, very hard. And I remember, when on graduation day, just feeling like, oh my gosh, I've done it. I've achieved this magnificent dream. So for me, it was really about the fulfillment of a long-held childhood dream.
Yeah, I think so many of us have that same path where we had picked something as a child and that has become like this dream for whatever reason, and we work towards it. And I think when you are good in school, or when you do well in that traditional path, it leads you kind of down to this thing that you have chosen without maybe really knowing what the actual reality of it is. And then you get there and it's great in the beginning. And I love that you say that, because I think a lot of us felt such a sense of pride when you accomplish something that you've been working so hard for so many years. And so you achieve this dream in a very prestigious profession. and you start, working as a doctor. And so at what point, like when did you start kind of getting maybe an inkling that this isn't for you or something isn't right?
Well, for me, it started quite early on. I studied here in South Africa and went over, after I graduated, I went over to the UK and did my internship over there. I then came back home to continue working as a doctor. And it was really during that time that I started just wondering whether I was on the right path. And, just perhaps a little bit of background on the public health system in South Africa. We essentially have two health systems, a private and a public health system. The private is excellent, really world class, and the public system is the exact opposite of that. And unfortunately, the public health system serves the vast majority of people in this country. For socioeconomic reasons, most people can't afford private healthcare. So the state of hospitals, our clinics, is not great. Doctors are overworked, undersupervised, very little support. There are often stockouts of essential medicines, equipment, so it's working in quite dire environments. And as a junior doctor, to be making decisions that are life and death, but to the extent that, first of all, you're not equipped physically, just in terms of having the basics that you need to do your best for your patients, but also in terms of your level of seniority, or even the fact that you're a junior doctor making decisions that you really shouldn't be making purely because you're the only person who's available to make them. So I felt quite traumatized and overwhelmed quite early on. And I internalized all of those feelings. I thought, there must be something wrong with me. I'm clearly not getting this thing right. I assumed everybody else, my colleagues, were on top of things. Obviously, I learned later on in my journey that that wasn't the case at all. But at the time, I honestly thought that, well, I'm clearly not cutting it in this profession. I'm struggling to deal with the enormity of the decisions that I'm required to make. And at the time, this was 2001, 2002, the president of our country at that time, this was the early days of the AIDS pandemic. But at the time, the president was an AIDS denialist. So not wanting to acknowledge the link between HIV and AIDS. And so because of that thinking, antiretroviral medication was not made available in the public health system, even though the research was showing that this medication was effective in terms of treating certain symptoms associated with the infection. So people were dying, every single day. It was just death after death after death. And when you know that people are dying unnecessarily because of policy decisions that aren't being taken, it becomes disheartening. And I got to the point where, on top of feeling traumatized, I also became disillusioned with the system. And that's when I started thinking to myself, 5 years from now, could I still be doing this? And I honestly couldn't see myself still in medicine. I just couldn't picture myself there in that environment. And that's when I started having thoughts about possibly leaving.
Wow. It's so relatable, I think, to so many people that are in these fields. Very emotionally overwhelming and draining professions where you're trying to help people that are underserved, that are voiceless, and you have a set of skills and you want so badly to be able to help, but you kind of find yourself kind of a cog in a wheel instead of, like, you go in, I think, with aspirations of thinking of how much you can change. And then you realize that you don't have the resources or the ability to actually make any difference.
Yeah.
You're just kind of working, alongside everybody else. I know I felt that way as a public defender, as an attorney who represented people who couldn't afford representation in our criminal justice system in the US. And I know a lot of public defenders feel, exactly what you are saying. I think social workers, doctors, in the majority of these countries that are dealing with underserved populations feel this way. And I wonder, one thing that I dealt with, and we've talked a lot about on this podcast, but it's not surprising that you feel overwhelmed and traumatized. And it's obviously very sad. I think a lot of people end up also feeling a little stuck and guilty about leaving because those people need it, so much. And they really need, and you think, well, if I leave, then, who do they have? And so did you struggle with those thoughts of like, these people already have so little, they're already not being given the resources that they need. So how can I leave them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I did struggle with those thoughts around letting people down. The patients, the profession, my professors, my colleagues, because again, from a personnel perspective, the system is already stretched. And, yet another doctor leaving wouldn't serve that purpose or would make things worse in that regard. So all of those thoughts kept going round in my mind. And even after I'd left, I think the biggest feeling that I carried with me for a number of years was guilt. So much so that if I was in a situation, if I met somebody new and I didn't have to tell them that I was once a doctor, I didn't. There were times when I would find myself deliberately withholding that information. For example, taking my children to see a doctor and just kind of feigning ignorance when the doctor would, say all sorts of things. And it's like, I just felt that I'd done something wrong. I felt that I had betrayed the profession. And so I sat with a lot of that guilt for a long time until I felt that I needed to do something about it.
Well, thank you for sharing that, because I think so many people honestly stay. And I'm sure it's the same for doctors. I know for lawyers, the rates of depression and suicide and drug abuse and all this stuff is so high because I think so many of us feel stuck, like we have to stay because of this level of guilt or the fear of what other people think or all this other stuff that gets tied in. So when you have that, and thank you for sharing that you have that, because I think it's helpful to see that, people struggle with this, but still like can find a way. How did you find that strength to say, like, even though I, haven't worked through these feelings, like I still need to get out?
So at the time of making the decision, it wasn't so much, oh, I've thought this through, therefore I'm going to leave.
Right.
It was much more, I was offered a job by leaders in healthcare that I really admired. And it was one of those, I could see that this could potentially be something valuable, right? And in that moment, I turned that job down and I knew that I was turning down more than that job. I was turning down, my future really in medicine. So it wasn't that, I had my pros and cons and then saw which ones are greater. It was, I'd done that process, but in that moment, I went with my heart.
And you mentioned that if you didn't have to tell people you were a doctor, maybe you didn't, but how did you deal with telling the people that did know you were a doctor, like your family or friends, people that had, and you were saying this has been your dream, you'd been clearly working towards this since you were a child. How did you deal with that type of, people's reactions to you leaving?
I mean, certainly with my family, they were very supportive because they'd seen me struggle. They'd seen me unhappy. So me leaving represented an opportunity for change, for better. So that was fine. I didn't come up against resistance from family, thank goodness. And I think everybody else, though, I'd get these stunned looks on people's faces, like, how on earth can you stop being a doctor? Who does that? So yeah, I got that a lot. And, people would ask me often, why did you leave? What was your reason? And for a long time, I didn't have those answers. I didn't have a packaged answer, right? I would and ah, and it was this and it was that, da, 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 and there wasn't a succinct answer that was clear and made sense to both me and to whoever was asking. And that is what then prompted me to write my memoir, because for me, I felt that there was something missing. There was this cloud that had been hanging over me for years. I mean, I think I only wrote the book, 6 or 8 years after I'd left medicine. Yeah. But all of that time, I was just kind of living under this cloud of question marks. So I needed to get to the bottom of it for myself, prompted by other people's incessant questions about why I'd left.
Right. And so how did you finally get to the bottom of that? Like what did that process look like for you?
Well, in writing the book, what I wanted to do was to go back to my experiences. I mean, one of the things I suppose I also needed to shock myself into that life again. So the first thing that I did was I got in touch with one of the professors at the medical school, and I said, I'd like to come and observe an autopsy at the local mortuary, because that's what I wanted to do with my medical career. In my mind, I had it that my medical career had died a premature death, and I wanted to perform a post-mortem on it. And in order to do that, I felt I needed to remind myself of what an autopsy entails. So I then got myself onto a group. I attached myself to a group of fifth year medical students and went to the mortuary to observe an autopsy. And it was really the beginning of this inquiry. So I went into writing the book as really an inquiry seeking answers for myself. So I revisited, my old medical school, some of the hospitals where I'd worked. I spoke to a whole number of doctors, some doctors who had also left medicine, asking them, what was your reason? What happened with you? What's your story? But also doctors who had stayed, what had you stay? What were your experiences? And it was during that process of writing the book that light bulb started going on for me, because I started to see, I could see that the stories that I was hearing were very similar and also very familiar. People, the same struggles, traumatized, overwhelmed, all the stuff that I've spoken about already. Those same sentiments were coming up over and over again. And it was then that I realized that, hang on a sec, this wasn't just me. This isn't something that was a personal failing. It's something that is much more systemic. There's something that's going on in the system, in this profession, that we're not talking about, but that is nonetheless having dire consequences and having a negative impact on the people who work in the system.
Right. You mentioned this before too, when you were saying that you felt as though like maybe there was something wrong with you and you weren't, you just maybe weren't as good enough, I guess, as a doctor. And then now realizing, and I think so many of us suffer through that, right? It must just be me. Like I'm not cut out, or I'm not smart enough, or I'm not like motivated enough, or whatever it is. And then the reality of it is, though, a lot of times these professions are just set up in such a way that it is too much. It's too overwhelming. It's too many, it's obviously there's different things in different professions, but it is traumatizing and it really does take a toll on so many people. And it's so liberating to see, like, it's not, like you were saying, there's nothing wrong with you if you're not happy in that situation. It's kind of accepting that it's okay. It's okay to walk away. It's okay that that didn't work. And like you were saying, kind of opening up this dialogue about, what are the systemic failures and how can we maybe remedy that so that people aren't leaving the profession?
Yeah, and for me, I think that's been the saving grace for me around my medical career. Just, because as I said earlier, for so long I'd carried this guilt with me. But by sharing my story, it has opened up a conversation, certainly amongst, in the medical fraternity in South Africa, about what's not working, what's the impact on doctors, issues around stress and burnout. We're now talking about those things. And I'm glad that I could contribute to that conversation, in many ways spark that conversation, because a lot of this came out as a consequence of my book being published.
That's incredible. And I think there's so much power to this, like people sharing their stories, because it's amazing how much we all resonate with each other's stories. We all feel like it's just us, like I'm just having these feelings. And then you start realizing, no, everybody, there's so many people that share these things. And it's such a powerful tool of kind of, like you said, opening up dialogue and affecting change. Hey, we'll get back to the episode in 1 minute. I just wanted to let you know that I have opened up doors to my small group program, Stuck to Strategy, for the new year. But doors are only opened for 1 week. So if you are tired of feeling stuck and overwhelmed and miserable and don't know what to do with the next step of figuring out the career that you love and how to leave the one that you don't like, I invite you to join. It's going to be amazing. There will be accountability, a community of people that think exactly like you and want the same things and are there to support you. There will be live Q&A sessions, live coaching calls, experts, video lessons, exercises, everything that you need to get out of this place of overwhelm and into a strategy that you can take step by step to figure out the career of your dreams. So if you're interested, go to quitterclub.com/group. I would love to see you there. And now back to the episode. And another thing I want to point out that I love about your story is that you left and it has taken you this many years to really kind of come to terms and analyze and kind of figure out why you were unhappy and all of the different aspects of what like prompted you to leave. And it took a real journey of uncovering those. And I think a lot of times people that are stuck in these careers, because they're not clear, because there's confusion, like they just know they're unhappy, but they can't figure out like why they're unhappy, or there is that guilt. We end up saying, because we so often like want a clear-cut answer, or we want something that's very like packaged nicely. And it's like, oh, well, now I'm going to leave to do this thing. And it doesn't work like that. And it's still okay if your well-being, if you need to leave because it is affecting you in a certain way. I think so often we just want that clear answer and it's not there. And I love that you're pointing out that like this is, a multi-year journey, almost, 8-10 years after you left, where you're figuring out and going back and trying to really understand like what was the impetus of you wanting to leave and why did it end in this way and what are the answers to that. And so it wasn't all just like wrapped up in a bow when you decided that like, it's time to go.
Absolutely. And I think that's also the value of sharing our stories, because after my book was published, I was inundated with emails from doctors who'd read it. And a lot of what the emails and messages were saying was, thank you, thank you for giving me a sense or putting words to what I felt. Because as you say, we know when we are not doing well, but often we don't have a language for it, especially when these issues around burnout are not openly discussed in our professions. It's difficult to know that, oh, hang on a sec, what I'm feeling is related to burnout, or it's related to feeling traumatized, etc. So because it's just kind of generalized discomfort that I can't put a label on, I'll just stay and tolerate it and hope for the best. Whereas when someone then uses language to name what it is that's going on, it's then that you're able to say, oh, hang on a sec, I can relate to that. That's what I'm going through. And I think really that's the value of sharing our stories.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I also think it gives people permission to have those feelings. I think a lot of times we feel like I should just be grateful. I have this career and I made it this far and I'm, a professional and I'm respected and whatever. And I should just like take this and it doesn't matter if I'm unhappy. I should stuff that down and just be grateful. And then when people share their stories, I think a lot of times, because I get the same thing through the podcast now, I constantly get emails or messages about like the fact that when I heard your intro story, I felt like it was my story. Like I felt like I was talking and I could relate to so much. And I think a lot of times it just gives people permission to then really even acknowledge that like, it's okay that I'm unhappy. It's okay for me to accept that I'm unhappy and then want to do something about it. Because for so often we try to just convince ourselves that we're not unhappy, that like, no, this is fine, like I'll make it work. And I think when someone else, whether it's with jobs, whether it's relationships, whether it's, as like parenthood, you see other mothers talking about their, let's say, postpartum depression or something. And then you think like, oh yeah, I felt like that too. And it's okay for me to say that it wasn't the happiest time of my life or whatever that where I feel like I'm supposed to say. And I think there's a lot of power in that, in knowing that we really, all of us feel the same way. A lot of us feel like imposters. A lot of us feel like we should be grateful and happy, but we're not, and whatever it is. And being able to accept that is just, it's a huge gift, I think, when people share their stories and you feel a little more seen. Like,
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And so going back really quickly, when you did actually leave, and so you've been working towards this goal, did you know what you were going to do or like what was going to be the next step for you?
No idea. All I knew was where I didn't want to be.
Yeah.
So I had no clue where I did. And that was hard as well. When you start on a path that is pretty certain, like medicine is, to then find yourself in no man's land, kind of, I don't know what I want to do with my life. That was hard. And I was there for quite a long time. So I worked in trade and investment promotion. I was a consultant for some time. I was in economic development. I mean, I did a whole range of different things, trying to find what that thing was for me. And it was only when I completed the medicine chapter by writing my book that the next step was available. I think up until then I was just kind of doing what I needed to do to pay the bills and hoping that there would be a light somehow. But I think I really needed to complete the medicine story. And it was after that that I then saw that, where I want to be is coaching and developing leaders and, the things that we've been talking about now. For me, it is tragic that intelligent, hardworking people who want to make a difference in the world end up in environments that don't support those aspirations. Everybody loses, not only those people, but the people that could be served by the doctors and the lawyers and the social workers and the teachers who choose alternative careers because they are not supported in their environment. So for me, it's really about how do I, through my work, support people to be great at what they do from a performance perspective, but also do so in a way that supports their well-being.
I love that. And I want to get more into what you're doing now, but just really quickly going back, because I think, that was the biggest struggle I had as well. And I think it's the biggest struggle that keeps people stuck is not knowing what else to do. And I think when you followed a set path, it's very difficult to go to something that's unknown now. Like there is no path. Like you just have to figure out what the next thing is. And it's so anxiety ridden for people that tend to have already like wanted to achieve. So can you tell us a little bit about like what your mindset was going through? Because that was the same thing for me. I mean, it took a number of years. And I think that a lot of times people don't think that they can weather that because it's like not knowing for so many years and that doubt. And a lot of that creeps in of like, did I make a mistake for leaving? Like, I have no idea what I'm doing. So like, how did you deal with some of that?
I struggled. And I think particularly in the professions, when we get our qualifications, it's not just a piece of paper. I think it becomes a part of our identity. And so leaving, it's more than just what's the next job. It's who am I now? Right. So that was the biggest thing for me. Who am I? What is my contribution? It became, those existential kind of
Yeah.
questions started cropping up for me quite a lot. So I really, really struggled to find my way. And often, what I say to people when they say, but I don't know, what's the next thing? It's, if we're intelligent, we're hardworking, we have big hearts, that's more than enough to do a whole range of different things in the world. But as you said earlier, often we are so streamlined in our thinking. It has to be this way. I know what the path looks like, and therefore I must just walk it. And if I'm off the path, then I'm in the wilderness. I think can be hard, but it can also be liberating as well to realize that the opportunities, they're potentially broader opportunities and quite varied opportunities beyond what is known. But that's both scary and exciting.
Absolutely. And I mean, we've talked a lot about that on the podcast. And I think it actually, as you become more comfortable with that unknown, it becomes more exciting. I think for me is having the confidence in myself that I will figure it out, not the confidence of knowing what it's going to be or, having to have control over everything. It's like, I have no idea in 5 years what's going to happen, but I know, like you were just saying, like you're smart enough, you're resourceful enough, you have the compassion, the heart, like I'll figure it out. And I think that makes it more liberating.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We just need to keep reminding ourselves of
Yeah,
that.
exactly. So,
Yeah.
talked a lot about this book. So, your book, which I think everybody should check out, it's called Post-Mortem, The Doctor Who Walked Away. And so, how did you even get into like wanting to write a book and getting published and doing, that going on that journey?
Um, it was one of those, it wasn't planned in that way. I didn't know that I was going to write that book. I felt, I remember one morning just feeling the urge to write, but it wasn't to write that book. It was actually the urge to write a novel. I'd seen a pamphlet advertising a challenge. It was called Write a Novel in 100 Days Challenge.
Oh,
Yeah. So I saw this, I thought, oh, I could do that, based on having never written a novel before. But it was one of those things, it was exciting. It was one of those, this could be fun. So I did that. And it was during the process, those 100 days, that I thought, oh, hang on a sec, maybe I could write nonfiction as well. So when I was done with the 100-day challenge, I then signed up for a nonfiction writing course, still not knowing what I was going to write about. And then on the course, we had to come up with a 5,000 word short story of our choosing. And I remember the course convener saying, what is a big question in your life? And the instant he said that, I knew that the question was, why did I leave medicine? And it was really, that was what sparked the writing of the book. It started with that short story. And then thereafter, I saw a call for submissions for nonfiction writing award. They wanted proposals. And they specifically wanted proposals for stories that spoke to a broader South African discourse, national discourse around issues. So I thought, oh, okay, this is around healthcare. This is an important story. So let me submit a proposal. And my proposal won. And so, yeah, so that award came with a publishing contract, which then got my book, and I had a year in which to write the book, and that's how my story got told.
I love this so much. But the main reason is that, like we were just saying, so often, like we want to know the path, right? We want to know the next thing. And like, no matter how much you tell people, like, that's not how it works. And you have to just try a bunch of things and because we want to figure out, like, what am I passionate about? And I just love that, like, you had been doing all these different things and like you just took a chance on doing a challenge for a novel, like with no intention of writing about your own story or writing a memoir. And that led you, to this kind of this spark and this question that like lights something up in you. And then what that has led to, like getting a publishing deal and writing a book and how that has kind of led you into the work that you're doing. I think it's just so incredible. And it's so hard because people like they want you to tell them like what their next thing should be and how they should do it. And it's like, it's just through this process. And so I just love this example of the fact of like how something so beautiful has come out of you, just doing a challenge for something that was completely unrelated. It's like one little thing leads to the next.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's that willingness to just take that next step, take the next step, take the next step. That's really what we can count on, But other than that, clear answers, they will emerge. The future emerges as we take the next step. But to expect to have all the answers at the get-go, well, yeah, that's not going to happen.
Right. You're going to stay stuck forever. So tell us a little bit, like what you're just saying, the coaching that you're doing now and how you've kind of led into this type of work.
Yeah, so what I do now is business and leadership coaching, and I do leadership development as well. I facilitate a number of leadership development programs, adjunct senior lecturer at the university here, University of Cape Town. And that really came about, well, partly as a consequence of the work that I did after medicine. So when I left medicine, I went and worked in trade and investment promotion. And a big part of that was around working in economic development and promoting South Africa and the Western Cape, the particular province that we're in, as an investment destination and promoting businesses in this province. And that really got me involved in the leadership development work, because a big part of the work that I do at the university is really about developing leaders in public life. So people who will be in, and some who are already in government and in the public sector in various forms. So that was part of how I got to the work that I'm doing now. But also, after my book was published and all those emails and conversations with doctors, I started asking myself, or I felt, initially I was quite a little bit miffed. I thought to myself, my intention in writing the book was to close the chapter, or to close the book really, on my medical career. And what I found was that writing the book, I'd only closed a chapter, really. There was all sorts that was opening up. And a part of me was like, no, but I'm done with this. I don't want this anymore. I thought this was supposed to end it all, but it didn't. I was asked, I was constantly asked to speak at universities, at medical schools, conferences. And I realized that there was a need. I touched on something. There was a need for developing people. There was a need for supporting people. And that really was what got me going on the coaching front, because I realized that the training that we get in medical school is fantastic, but what is required in the job is far more than what's available, what we learn in the textbooks. It's the being of the work that doesn't get taught. The technical stuff you learn, but the human stuff you don't learn. And it's the human stuff that really makes a difference. And so initially it was about coaching doctors, and I do continue to do that. And more broadly, I do business coaching. So I also coach people in the private sector. But often the issues outside of the context, the human issues are the same. How do I perform better in my work? How do I do so without compromising my home life, my personal life, my health? All of those, how do I develop myself from an emotional perspective? How do I manage things like stress and anxiety? How do I, understand how my brain works so that I'm producing better results? All of those things have really a big part of the work that I do.
I love that. Yeah. And I think, it goes back to what we've been touching on this whole time, is that like we all have the same struggles. We all have the same doubts and fears. And anxiety is. And it really is just learning how to manage our minds and figure out how to kind of be the best versions of ourselves, whether we're going to stay in that field or not, but just figuring out our well-being and how do we make ourselves kind of the happiest, wholest versions of ourselves that we can be with everything that life throws at us. And I think that I love that people are now becoming more open to going to coaching. And it's just so helpful to really see the blind spots that we don't tend to see in our own lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, I think as well, there is a shift happening in terms of a greater emphasis on well-being as a necessary part of performance. Whereas I think in the past it was, burn the midnight oil, you'll sleep when you die kind of
Yeah.
mentality. Whereas more and more the science is showing us that that is not accurate.
Yeah.
That well-being is actually an essential part of performing in our workplaces. So I think it's timely to be doing this kind of work because it doesn't seem strange anymore.
Right.
To be talking about well-being and
yes.
those kinds of issues.
Yeah, and thank goodness that hustle culture is kind of going away and we are now focusing more on really our own mental health and physical health, because it's crazy what we've kind of been indoctrinated to have to push so hard. And I'm just so thankful that people are now waking up to kind of realizing how much rest and rejuvenation and mental well-being, how important it is to a fulfilling life.
Absolutely.
Well, I think what you're doing is incredible, Maria. Honestly, I can't thank you enough for being here. Do you have any maybe advice or parting words for somebody that might be where you were, in a profession where that's what they'd worked towards their whole life and they're unhappy and they just don't really know what to do from here?
Yeah, I think I would say, firstly, trust what you're feeling. Because I think a lot of what goes on internally is feeling what you're feeling, but thinking, oh, it can't be, or it shouldn't be, right? So the first thing is trust what you're feeling. And I think the second thing is you'll be okay. You're smart, you're hardworking, you got to where you got to because you are smart and hardworking and you want to make a difference in the world. That's fantastic. You've got a lot going for you. Trust yourself, make the decision that feels most appropriate for you, and trust that you will be okay because you will be.
I love that. Thank you so much, Maria. Where can people come and find you if they want to see more of what you're doing or maybe get in touch?
They can connect with me via LinkedIn, just at Maria Phalime, and then on my website, mariaphalime.com. And they can also connect with me via Twitter or Instagram, both at Maria Phalime.
Wonderful. I will link to all of those. So if people can't write it down right now, and I would also highly suggest that you check out Maria's TED Talk, which I will link to in the show notes. I mean, I was literally hanging on your every word. I loved your TED Talk so much. It is so inspiring and it's such a nice window into your world. So thank you again. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And you're more than welcome, Golly. Thank you.
I love that conversation with Maria. And here are my 3 takeaways. 1, trust what you're feeling. You are allowed to take care of yourself. And if you are feeling burdened or heavy or sad or whatever it is in that position, even if you feel guilty for leaving, even if you feel like it might be crazy, trust yourself. You know what you need and what you don't. 2, you may not have it figured out, and that's okay. It's a process. It's a journey. It doesn't happen overnight. So often we want that answer before we take a leap. And unfortunately, that's not the way it works. So don't let that be the reason that you don't take that step forward. And 3, by putting your story out there, you are giving other people permission to speak up and make changes and live the life that they want. Courage is contagious. And when you are willing to be the one that takes that scary step, you will be amazed at the ripple effect that it has with the people around you. I hope you liked this episode, and I will be back next week with a new one. Thank you so much for listening. I can't tell you how much it means to me. If you liked the podcast, please rate and review us on iTunes. It'll help other people find the show. If you want to connect or reach out, follow along on Instagram and Facebook at Lessons from a Quitter, and on Twitter at Quitter Podcast. I would love to hear from you guys, and I'll see you on the next episode.